joining me. This is, as you know, a bittersweet day. In just a few minutes, I'm going to sign a package of bills that moves our state laws forward. It gives survivors the opportunity for justice. We need to recognize this act. We need to recognize it because many of these survivors have waited years or decades for this moment. But the mere fact that we need this legislation is a very sad reminder of the horrors that too many Pennsylvanians have faced, and of the faults in our justice system that prevent frightened, abused children from seeking justice when they grow into courageous adults. Representative Mark Rozzi is a shining example of how a survivor of childhood abuse can develop a powerful voice in adulthood. And he deserves an immense amount of credit for having the courage to share his story so other survivors do not suffer in the same silence that he did. Every survivor who comes forward as the result of this legislation deserves our support. And that's why I'm pleased that Representative Rozzi's bill not just abolishes the criminal statute of limitations on childhood sexual abuse and extends the timeline for survivors to seek civil action, but it also provides services for survivors through the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. This is part of the recommendation that came from the grand jury that investigated child sex abuse by Catholic priests, as are other parts of this bill, including this package, including Representative Todd Stevens' bill that increases penalties for a mandated reporter who fails to report child abuse, and Representative Tara Toohill's bill that makes conversations with law enforcement agents exempt from non-disclosure agreements. As we learn more about the traumatic events like abuse, the effect they have on the victim's brain, the long-term behavioral changes that they can cause, the consequences that they have on communities, we've come to understand the challenges survivors face in seeking justice. And that's why it's not enough to extend or abolish the statute of limitation for childhood sexual abuse. While this is a huge step forward for younger victims, we still need to find a way to help survivors who have fought for years to have their cases heard and are now outside the new age range. We need to follow through with creating a 2-year revival window for victims to file civil charges in older cases. So a bill sponsored by Representative Jim Gregory was approved this year, but we will need to amend the Pennsylvania Constitution to create this window. And that's going to require Pennsylvanians to approve this change in a referendum. So we must keep talking about this issue. We need to leave here today with the intent of informing our friends, our neighbors, of the importance of passing this amendment. And while we celebrate the monumental victory of many survivors of childhood sexual abuse finally receiving their opportunity for justice, we must recognize that we are not yet done. We must continue pushing forward until every survivor of every age has the chance to tell his or her story. Thank you again to Representatives Rozzi, Gregory, Stevens, and Toohill for their hard work in getting this legislation to my desk. And to every member of the legislature and the advocacy groups who have fought so hard to protect survivors of abuse. And especially to Attorney General Josh Shapiro, who has led the way in ensuring survivors of childhood sexual abuse in Pennsylvania see their abusers brought to justice. Now I'm honored to turn this over to Representative Rozzi. Mark.
Thank you, Governor, for your support of not only the legislation, but for me over the last 7 years in office and all the different times that we have met and spoke about this legislation means the world to me. And I'm truly appreciative that we're able to do this in my district today. It's an honor to have you come into the 126 and to the high school that I graduated from, the high school that has given me so much. One of the reasons why I wanted to have it here is for our students. These bills are for you. We're here to protect you moving forward with House Bill 962. House Bill 962 is historic, the changes that we're going to make. Think about this. The current criminal statute of limitations in Pennsylvania is 50. It is now abolished, eliminated. Victims have any amount of time to come forward. But to put it in perspective, those victims that were in the grand jury report, they only had 5 years to come forward in 1983 and 1984. Think about that. 5 years. Clearly not enough time. We also changed the civil statute of limitation. Currently, it is 30. When the governor signs this bill today, it will increase it to age 55. And again, to put it in perspective, for a child being abused in 1983 and 1984, that child only had 2 years to come forward from the date of the act. Unacceptable. Senator Lisa Baker added an amendment to the bill that made it even better. For victims between the ages of 18 and 23, the criminal statute of limitation was 12 years from the act. When the governor signs this bill, it would be 20 years. The civil statute of limitations for those same victims is only 2 years. When the governor signs this bill today, it will be up to age 30. The governor has supported It's On Us, a campaign to protect our college kids. And this is only going to strengthen that measure. It's just not about educating and supporting those victims, but it's putting laws in place that give victims their rights and their day in court. And we're also going to be removing governmental and sovereign immunity in this bill as well. Moving forward, our kids will be protected. They will be on the same playing field as those perpetrators. We're taking those rights of perpetrators away today. I just want to thank also the Attorney General for your work in releasing that grand jury report and giving us our voices. We know our work is not done here today. It's going to continue. And to my family and friends for coming out today. My mother, who is in Las Vegas and can't make it back, and she got ill while she was out there. She so desperately wanted to be here today with me. And they just showed a video, they're live streaming, and she was crying that she couldn't be here today because that woman has never left my side and has fought with me day after day. Not only to make sure that my son, her son, stayed safe, but to just let everybody else out there know, protect your children, keep an eye on them, don't trust anybody. So it's just an honor to be able to come here today for these students and know that if you have a passion and you believe in something, fight for it. Don't ever give up. Never, never give up. And you will accomplish your goals. Next speaker I want to introduce is Senator Lisa Baker.
Good morning, everyone. To Governor Wolf and to the Attorney General, thank you for your leadership and your commitment. But I have to say, it is without the profiles in courage of Mark Rozzi, of Jim Gregory, Tara Toohill, Todd Stevens, and all of the ardent advocates, we would not be here, along with our elected leaders across the state. We're lauding the approval of long-awaited remedies for thousands of Pennsylvania abuse victims. Their own experiences in combination with those of others who came forward with their painful personal accounts proved too powerful for all the obstacles of law and politics that they faced and ultimately overcame. So this is about profiles and courage of these individuals. They have earned all of our respect for their leadership and their perseverance. Today, we offer a monumental thank you to these legislative champions and the survivors who gave the voice to the voiceless. Tara Toohill is someone for whom I have great regard for her principle and commitment. Unfortunately, a family matter kept her at home. So she asked me to speak about her bill. Her driving motivation for that bill was a horrific experience of one of her constituents, who, for understandable reasons, wishes not to be put in the public spotlight today. This individual was impregnated by a priest, coerced into an abortion, and compelled to sign a non-disclosure agreement in a settlement. Is there anyone who thinks silencing this woman forever provides any measure of justice or accountability? And despite all the heartbreaking disclosures, it's highly probable there are individuals who still feel constrained by non-disclosure agreements. Yet it is vital for law enforcement, the general will tell you this, and others, that we have to hear from everyone who has been abused once by a perpetrator and then again by an unfair system. So what Representative Toohill has done is made sure that that can happen, that they can come forward and share their story. I'm honored to speak on behalf of Representative Toohill and her brave survivor who endured the unthinkable. Today, we right and correct a terrible injustice. And with this bill signing, we also cross a major threshold. But as you heard from other speakers, this is not the end of things. In the next legislative session, we will have a strong moral and political responsibility to give second-round approval to the proposed constitutional amendment swiftly to ensure that it goes before the voters as quickly as possible in 2021. For the record, there are Senate advocates who strenuously pushed modifications. My colleague, Senator Carney, is here along with other members of the aisle, both on the Republican and Democratic side. And as you heard from Representative Rozzi, we made several substantial contributions to his pivotal legislation by adding vulnerable college-age young men and women. And I must point out that the young woman who testified before the Senate, Lakeisha Anthony, is standing here with us, sharing her voice. Her voice was instrumental in getting us to see that that change needed to be made, as well as the counseling services for any child or adult survivor, along with the funding to pay for that. A window may never matter for some victims, but this counseling could be the significant difference. So the House members whose bills we signed today deserve the fullest commendation for their passionate and steadfast advocacy on behalf of all abuse survivors and victims. And it is evidence that a bit of compromise brought about consensus. This is truly in the public interest, and I am honored to be with you this morning. Our next speaker, I know, has been delayed, Representative Stevens, so we will. Oh, you're.
I snuck in behind.
Did you sneak in? You are not delayed. I offered the microphone to you.
Well, thank you, Senator Baker, and thank you, Governor, for the opportunity to join you and these other outstanding leaders here today. Thanks also to our Attorney General, Josh Shapiro, for his steadfast leadership and efforts to ensure that the grand jury recommendations became law here in Pennsylvania. I spent 10 years prosecuting child abuse cases in the Montgomery County District Attorney's Office. As the captain of the sex crimes unit there, I worked daily with families facing the unthinkable. Their child had been sexually abused, typically by someone they trusted. I saw firsthand the pain and the turmoil and the trauma that these children, these young children, and their families experienced. In 2014, following the horrific Jerry Sandusky case, we rewrote our Child Protective Services laws as it relates to those who are required to report suspected child abuse by virtue of their position or profession. My bill, which became Act 32 of 2014, dramatically increased the penalties for failing to report suspected child abuse. The recent grand jury report on widespread sexual abuse across the Commonwealth, while recognizing our efforts, recommended that we clarify when those tougher penalties should apply under our law. Today, we continue that work to better protect Pennsylvania's children. My bill, which the governor will sign today, House Bill 1051, makes it clear, and I want to make sure everybody gets this right, that anyone who knows of ongoing child abuse and fails to act will face harsh penalties. That should be abundantly clear. It also increases the penalty for ongoing failure to report continuing sexual abuse when the individual knows or has reason to believe that that abuse will be continuing. It increases those penalties from a first-degree misdemeanor to a third-degree misdemeanor. I also want to thank the governor for signing into law House Bill 1171, ensuring no predator can escape accountability through the use of confidentiality agreements, and House Bill 962, increasing the statute of limitations for civil claims and eliminating the statute of limitations altogether for criminal prosecutions. I want to especially thank Senator Baker for ensuring that these bills were considered and were moved swiftly through the Senate and got the consideration that they deserved, and working hard to make sure that they could reach the governor's desk for his signature today. Taken together, the bills the governor is signing into law today will help ensure that those who prey on our most vulnerable citizens are held accountable for their actions and receive the serious consequences that they deserve. Thank you. Sorry, I was remiss. The governor fortunately kept me in line. Next, I'd like to introduce Representative Gregory for some remarks.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me here today. I bring you much appreciation from the people of the 80th District in Blair County. It's home to many things. Unfortunately, it was also home to a very unfortunate trial that took place in the 90s, in the Francis Luddy trials. And to know that we have come this far to be here today to see these bills signed, thank you to the governor, thank you to the Attorney General. Thank you to everyone that helped make this possible, whether you were on either side of your belief of the issue and how it should be solved. We are here today because we believe we've come up with the very best solution. But I'm here to thank one really important person, and that's Mark Rozzi. I got to tell you that in August of 2018, I put out a press release as a candidate that the first thing I was going to do is put this constitutional amendment out, and amazingly, that's what happened. Even more amazingly, though, is that Mark went to the Vatican. He came back a changed man in terms of how he wanted to see this done. And that change is why we are here today, because he was aware of my interest in the constitutional amendment. This guy shows up at my office one day in February, early February, and says, I just need a couple of minutes. I'm not sure who it is. I just need a couple of minutes. I just left the leader's office, your House leadership, and told them what I wanted to do because I wanted to change my tact. The only way we were going to get this done is to do it the way you wanted to do it, and to do it together. You sponsor mine, I'll sponsor yours. We can get this done. And I realized, oh my goodness, it's Mark Rozzi. How does this happen? For me, my faith tells me that God's hand has been in this from the very beginning. We are here because nothing happens in God's world by mistake, including the abuse that happened to me. I visited Latrobe yesterday, where I grew up, and I went to the place between the garages where it happened for me. And I got to tell you, it is amazing to think that as a 10-year-old boy, I can stand here 47 years later and say that if you are being abused, if you have been abused, Tim, he has an opportunity with the 2-year look back to be able to revisit the statute of limitation for his lawsuit. Tim, thank you for sharing your story with me. The opportunity that we are bringing to the people of Pennsylvania to be a legislator for a day, to say that this is what you believe for the victims of sexual abuse, child sexual abuse in Pennsylvania, this is your chance to make history for the people that are victims in our Commonwealth. So I have to tell you that there was a piece of the garage on the ground where I was leaned up against. I can tell you that as victims, we never forget the surroundings, what it smelled like, what it felt like, what it looked like. It never goes away. But if we can talk about it, we can help stop the cycle, the ripple effects of child sexual abuse and all the other effects it causes for our society, whether it's drug addiction, other abuse, the trauma that we create for our families. It can stop. We can work to help it stop by doing what we are doing today, signing these bills and continuing the conversation for the statute of limitations by the spring of 2021. God bless you, Mark Rozzi. Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you for being here today. So at this time, I have a great honor to introduce the man that really helped put this all in motion. He's been to Blair County many times, and we had a chance to speak on a radio show that I was doing back then. One of the days I called Gratitude Friday because I wanted to talk about gratitude. And it's amazing that he can be here, that I can tell him how grateful I am that he is here today for the work that he has done. Ladies and gentlemen, Attorney General Josh Shapiro.
Thank you, everyone. It is indeed a pleasure to be here with our survivor legislators, Mark Rozzi and Representative Gregory. It's as much of an honor to me to also be here with our survivor advocates, names you may not know but who have affected me greatly, people like Julianne Bortz, people like Sean Doherty, people like Bridie Farrell, and others who do the work every day to make sure that this issue is heard. I want to thank publicly again and again my lead prosecutor in this case, Dan Dye, who is with us today. And Dan, I thank you for your tremendous leadership. Last year, I stood before the people of Pennsylvania to detail the findings of my office's grand jury report on clergy abuse and cover-up. The grand jurors, in their 884-page report, shed a light on the decades of abuse that had been hidden in darkness behind the shield of the Catholic Church. The report gave voice to thousands of victims and exposed 301 predator priests. It documented the systematic cover-up of abuse organized and orchestrated by church leaders here in Pennsylvania, going all the way to the Vatican. And because of the brave voices of survivors, change started to happen. We've answered 1,961 calls to our clergy abuse hotline in the past 15 months. 90% of those calls have been about clergy abuse and its cover-up. There have been new charges filed and new investigations opened. 21 state attorneys general launched investigations modeled after ours in the wake of this report. More predator priests are finally being held accountable. The Pope convened an international summit attended by Representative Rozzi to finally speak about the sins of the Catholic Church and the steps he planned to take to address this crisis. But despite all of that, we were still waiting here in Pennsylvania on action on a key part of the grand jurors' work, the 4 recommended changes to Pennsylvania law to give victims of child sexual abuse the ability to hold their abusers accountable. The grand jury wrote that their report was, quote, to shine a light and make recommendations for how the law should change so that maybe no one will have to conduct an inquiry like this ever again. I'm proud to say today that 15 months after the release of the grand jury report, we have begun to make progress to ensure that this type of widespread abuse and cover-up never happens again. The grand jury recommended 4 very specific reforms. With these bill signings today, we are accomplishing 3 of them and fundamentally changing Pennsylvania's justice system to better protect victims. My office legally could only charge 2 predator priests following the release of the grand jury report. Those priests have pled guilty and are behind bars for a lengthy sentence for their crimes. If the bills that the governor is here to sign today were in place then, today we would have more than 100 predator priests behind bars. They would be away from children and out of their communities. From this day forward, victims of childhood sexual abuse will have until they are ready to report their crimes. No child who has been sexually abused will have to be pressured by the threat of an artificial age ceiling for reporting the crime committed against them. Because of these new laws, it is now very clear who must report child abuse. It's also very clear what the penalties are for those who turn a blind eye to that abuse. And survivors now know that nothing can impede them from coming forward and going to law enforcement. No confidentiality agreement, no settlements, and no NDAs. And as for civil suits, victims of sexual abuse now have until they are 55 to file these claims, which is 25 years longer than they have under current law. But let me be very clear. We are not finished. While today we are here to mark some of those reforms becoming law, our work is not over. We have fixed a broken system and have protected survivors who have had their youth stripped from them by predators. But we have yet to secure justice for victims like the ones detailed in our report. Victims deserve the ability to have their day in court, in these cases civilly, and I do not accept, for one, that we need to wait until 2021 or have more votes to ensure that ability for these survivors. By waiting, we are robbing the very victims who made this day possible. We are robbing them of the only closure before them. Think about the many other Pennsylvanians who have a story to tell of sexual abuse. Why should anyone who's been a victim of sexual abuse or its cover-up be made to suffer while others get 3 or 4 more years of a free pass? We need a bill to give survivors of this heinous abuse the option to hold their abusers accountable, and we need this legislation now. I want to thank those 23 grand jurors, some in the legislature who stood up and said enough is enough, including those behind me here today, and pushed for votes on all 4 reforms. And I especially want to thank Governor Wolf for his leadership, and importantly, First Lady Frances Wolf for her words and her leadership throughout this process. And Governor, for your support in signing these bills here today. But all of this, and I know the Governor would agree with me, would be impossible without the voices of survivors. Their willingness to be active and seek real change, and the bravery of coming into light to have their voices heard. These survivors have experienced a lifetime of anguish and trauma. They need counseling and treatment for having to deal with these predator priests, and they too deserve justice. My promise to all of the survivors who still want the chance to file civil actions against their attackers is that I am not done fighting. Neither are these victims who I know are here today, advocates like Marcy Hamilton and Bridie Farrell and others. We are not done fighting. There is not a day that goes by where I don't get stopped by a victim or a parishioner who wants to share with me the impact the report has had on them. I will never quit on them. I will never quit on these survivors, and I won't rest until we've completed the assignment set forth by the 23 men and women from Pennsylvania who made up that grand jury. We've done 3 things the investigative grand jury recommended because they were the right things to do. Let's do the 4th and give survivors a window now to file civil suits and get their day in court, and the only closure left available to them. But let us also celebrate the real progress that we've made, despite the strong winds blowing against us. Let's be thankful that today, after so many years of waiting, we've taken a leap forward to protect victims here in our Commonwealth going forward. We've seen it time and time again, from the Catholic Church to other powerful institutions. They cannot be trusted to police themselves. Now, that is clearly the job of law enforcement, thanks to these 3 pieces of legislation. Today, the hand of law enforcement has been strengthened, and children are better for it. I thank you for being here today, and I thank you for your commitment to these issues. And with that, it's my honor to welcome back to the podium our great Governor, Tom Wolf.
So I want to add my thanks to Attorney General Shapiro, again, all the legislators who have made this day possible. As the Attorney General so eloquently said, we still have work to do. But let's start with these 3 bills, and I'm proud to sign them, and I'll come back and answer any questions. So who's going to join me? Mark, you have to sit. Are there any questions that any of us can answer?
Governor, do you support what the Attorney General said about needing legislation to create that 2-year window now, as some victims would like, rather than waiting through the process?
Yes.
And why?
Well, I mean, I think he said it very well. We've made great progress, 3 out of the 4. We're in a very different place now than we were, and victims have redress that they didn't have just a few minutes ago. But we still have unfinished business, and I think we have to keep working until we have all 4 of the grand jury's recommendations in place. Anything else? Yes.
Governor, I've heard concerns from the victim advocate community, from the survivor community, concerns that the Constitution will never be changed, whether the legislature can be trusted to pass this again, or whether, say, a very well-funded campaign against it would defeat it at the ballot box. Have you heard these concerns? Do you share those concerns?
Yeah, I think it's a real concern, and I was heartened. I think Senator Baker, Senator Baker, I think said it well, that we want to work very hard to get those constitutional amendments passed, and the first step is to have the second passage in the General Assembly. And that's why what the Attorney General said, instead of waiting until 2021, which, if successful, would keep us until 2021 to get that 4th recommendation. Legislation now would change that, which is why, again, I agree with the Attorney General that we ought to be pushing for that.
Have you secured any sort of commitment from leaders of the legislature that they will fight for this in the next session?
The amendment or the?
The amendment.
Senator Baker just said that she's committed to it, and she's one of the leaders of the Senate. Yeah.
As chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, you absolutely have my commitment that I will advance that.
Thank you very much. Anything else?
Sir,
Yes.
this is a monumental moment for our young people here to be present and all. And I know that you have a very busy schedule. I was just wondering if you would have a moment to have your picture taken.
Absolutely. I just have a question for you. I saw one of the cadets have some problems. Is she going to be okay?
She will be fine.
Okay,
Just
good.
lock her.
Okay.
Lock her knees.
Okay. You're not supposed to do that. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much, and again, thank you for